Hello and welcome to the Stack Magazine's podcast. My name is Stephen Watson and I run Stack, the independent magazine club that delivers a different publication to your door every month. In this episode, I'm speaking with Hilary Brenhouse and Meara Sharma from Elastic, the magazine of psychedelic art and writing that released its first issue last year, encouraging readers to open their minds up to a more expansive, more weird image of the world. Hilary, Meara, thank you so much for making time to talk with me.
Thanks for having us.
I'm so excited to get into this because when I received Elastic last year, it was one of those magazines that was really announcing itself as like, okay, I'm here to do something different, but I'm really interested to hear about how you two talk about this thing that you've made. So I guess, first of all, how do you describe Elastic?
Well, Elastic essentially came about because I'd begun to recognize that the ways in which we talk about psychedelia, psychedelic art, are just so incredibly narrow. I kept going to like electronic music festivals and conferences and things that were purporting to show psychedelic art, and every time everything just looked the same to me. So just as you might imagine, like fluorescent mandalas and contorted mushrooms and that kind of thing. And I think, Meara and I met when we were working as editors at Guernica, which is an online literary magazine. And as a reader and an editor, I have been really drawn to writing that plays with time, that plays with space, that is sort of dissolves the imagined lines between genres. So that is not really fiction, that's not really nonfiction. And reading this really like strange literature, it just made me feel like, okay, some of this writing is a lot more evocative of the psychedelic experience than the art that I'm seeing on the walls. And so, the idea was really to make a home for genre bending, time bending, space bending, very dreamy, very strange work that might not be able to find its place otherwise. I don't know how I pitched it to you, Meara, initially.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how you pitched it to me, but I think what drew me right away was exactly what you're describing, which is an interest in work that doesn't fit into the usual categories. The work that I've always loved editing the most, reading the most, is work that blurs genre, that kind of starts one way and puts you somewhere else, that kind of really plays with language as a medium as well. And so I think I've always been interested in that kind of writing, and increasingly had been feeling like there wasn't an obvious forum for it in the literary world. I think you tend to read a lot that feels similar, that sort of strikes a similar tone. And I think I was excited about a project that was explicitly about work that feels different, that feels mind expanding, whatever that might mean. And I think for me, psychedelic is such a kind of expansive term that allows us to reach into all of these different corners and also kind of make a case for exploding the term, because of course it has so many kind of heavy and historic associations. And I think I've had interesting conversations with people about what does psychedelic actually mean, and sometimes those conversations are kind of antagonistic, and I think it actually is really interesting because it it elicits strong feelings in people.
There's a line in the editor's letter, which I think is quite telling. So the editor's letter starts by saying, the idea behind this magazine is simple enough. And that for me then implies the reality may not be quite as simple as the idea. So and you've already mentioned some of these things. Like, where were the bits that things started to get sticky? Like, what got difficult with this?
I mean, I think that one of the things, speaking of the editor's note that I wrote about in that letter, was just like the process of putting this together. Like, we had previously worked on themed issues at Guernica together. And I think that, you know, I'm used to putting together a themed issue where you sort of imagine, okay, like this is the deserts issue. That was like, you know, one of the things that I worked on at Guernica. What are all the millions of ways that you can interpret that word, whether it's like food desert or, you know, sand or whatever, and who would best populate this? Like, how can we imagine all the contours of this thing, and who are we going to approach to populate it? And when we tried to do that, so this first issue of Elastic is the dying issue, and when we tried to do that here, like, okay, dying, you know, who are we going to come to, and what are we going to ask for? I think that we learned pretty early on that you cannot control a magazine of psychedelic art and writing. There's no way to tell people. You're approaching people who are already writing in a psychedelic register. That for me is really important. Like, I don't want Elastic doesn't seek to push people into this register, but it's recognizing that that I mean, in a very real way, I think psychedelics and the ubiquity of psychedelics and the language and ethos of the psychedelic experience have had a massive impact on modern art and literature that's kind of gone unacknowledged in a lot of ways. And you see that impact sort of trickle through, so that even people who don't have personal experience with psychedelics have been impacted by that language and that ethos. And so, yeah, you take what you get. I mean, these contributors sort of did things, and in the second issue that we're assembling now are continuing to blur lines between dreaming life and waking life, between genres, between all kinds of things. The next issue is the interspecies issue, so between species, in ways that we could never have cooked up ourselves. And so I think that's the sticky part, is sort of being like, oh, I'm used to feeling very in control as like editor and publisher of a thing, but actually this thing is going to take the shape that it wants to.
Yeah.
I think you said something in the editor's letter about like that nobody did what they were asked. Nobody did what they said they were going to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think something interesting about the curatorial kind of commissioning process has been how, you know, on the one hand, we are curators. We're kind of going out there looking for work that is operating already in these registers and saying, let's bring this together and kind of make this case about how psychedelics and psychedelia have had this impact on culture. At the same time, I think we're also giving people the permission to be weirder than they might maybe
Yeah.
think they could be, or take risks in ways that they maybe can't always take in other spaces. So, you know, there are writers we've approached who, responding to the theme, have said, "Oh, I have this piece. You know, I'm just going to kind of loosely make something up here, but I have this piece about like a talking monkey for interspecies, right?" That might be the thing that initially came to mind for that person, but then kind of going deeper with that writer and saying, you know, we're really, this theme is a very a kind of expansive canister, and pushing the writer to think beyond the immediate associations. And so then doing that kind of has yielded pieces that are less kind of on the nose, but are kind of more psychedelic in feeling, you know, involving repetition or involving echoes or cycles, or, you know, larger scale kind of aspects of the psychedelic experience, I suppose, that may not be apparent straight away. So I guess in that sense, we are part curator, part provocateur, and kind of saying to people, you know, go strange, and kind of think beyond what you normally are allowed to do. So
Yeah.
that's really exciting, to kind of encourage writers to take risks and also show us work that they might think is totally unsuitable for any other magazine.
Right.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
give permission. I think one of the most rewarding parts of this has been regularly receiving notes from people saying, I didn't realize that my novel had been written in a psychedelic register. I didn't realize like the psychedelic undertones of my own work, but it's sort of like opened a door for me, and that feels really nice.
Yeah. Well, I suppose part of the kind of what's special about this is you're defining something afresh. So the one of the things that really struck me is the kind of subtlety in the magazine. So you have that line about I think it's on the outside back cover. Yeah, the ordinary, only slightly weirdly off, and it's that I think that's the thing that makes it interesting because it's not like the big, I don't know, like sort of day glow psychedelic trip. It's the thing that's like, oh, hang on, what? That's
Yeah.
not normally there. Like it. It's interesting that people responded to you in a way that kind of didn't necessarily go big. Were there some people you had to kind of pull back and go, that's not really what we're looking for?
I mean, we do very little pulling back, I think. We do more of what Meara was just describing, which is like keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah. But I think that, I think that that line in general, just that feeling, it's just like when you look at a lot of when people think about contemporary psychedelic art, they're really picturing one thing. And I think that that one thing is sort of like a trip report. It's like all of the fractals and the fluorescence, exactly what you would experience on a really strong psychedelic journey, but like committed to the page. But I think that like the psychedelic experience is so vast, and a lot of the time it just means exactly that, like ordinary life, but something is a little off, like something is a little bit strange. And that is like, to my mind, a much more common psychedelic experience. And by psychedelic experience, I don't necessarily mean taking psychedelics, but like, you'll see in this issue that like we think that grief is a very psychedelic experience in the way that it scrambles time, in the way that like it makes you feel connected to everyone because everyone is going to die, but then also it's so deeply personal and zoomed in, and it's like your grief is the only grief that's ever existed in the world. Childbirth as a psychedelic experience that that is simultaneously extremely embodied, but also kind of puts you out of the body, like those kinds of things. A lot of psychedelic experience is kind of ordinary, but also totally inexplicable and like incomprehensible.
Yeah, and I think the work also that often makes the most impact, certainly on me, and I think on Hillary, and I think on a lot of people, is work that's rooted in the real. Um, so the approach might be very unusual or unconventional or strange, but you still have this feeling of this is authentic in some way. This is not authentic in a sort of realist sense, but authentically true to the writer, authentically kind of true to some common human experience. And I think that's been really important for us to make sure the work still strikes a kind of genuine chord. So it's not just out there for the sake of being out there. And we've definitely received work that is wild and crazy and all over the place and maximalist and lush and all these wonderful things, but lacks that sort of sense of authenticity or depth or kind of rootedness in the real that I think makes the work readable and powerful in addition to being experimental.
Yeah, completely. I think early on we were like, oh, we're not here really to publish work about dragons and robots 200 years in the future taking over. Like it really is, one of the things that really like empowered me in putting this together is this amazing piece by Emily Lordy in T, the New York Times Style magazine, about the underrecognized like Black artists and creative thinkers who led the artistic movement during the first psychedelic era. And Emily sort of distinguished psychedelia from things like Afrofuturism by saying like psychedelia has always been rooted in the here and now. It's like you can turn the world upside down and inside out in your artwork, in your writing, but like you're responding to the world that we live in. And I think that that resonated with us really strongly.
Mm. I'm interested, like, so when you're at that very first point, you're thinking that, I'm interested in this vision of psychedelia. I think I've got something new and like interesting to contribute here. Did you know right from the start this was going to be a print magazine, or did that kind of just present itself along the way?
I knew that it would be a print magazine, A, because I've always wanted to make one. I was talking, speaking of Guernica, I was talking to somebody the other day about how at Guernica we used to pretend that it was a print magazine by every 2 weeks being like, there's a new issue. Here are all the pieces in the issue, except for that nobody reads that way online. And, it doesn't matter if you tell them what to read next. They won't read it next because they get 3/4 of the way through the first thing and then the phone rings and they're gone. And so but I think that this project in particular just necessitates it for a lot of reasons. Firstly, because the interactions that happen on the page between art and writing and design could never have been mirrored online. And certainly not, it's like, this object is meant to evoke the psychedelic experience just in the way that the object functions. And so it's like you see something on page 2, and then you see it again in a different form on page 150, and you're like, whoa, where have I seen that before? Like, you cannot replicate that online. And I think that a lot of great magazines gave us the permission to, when I saw that there were print magazines that were just not putting their content up on their website, I was like, oh my God, thank goodness. I didn't know that you could do that. And so that's what we've done. It's like, if you want it, you have to get it. But it's like the psychedelic experience is so sensory. And I think that touching the pages, the wonderful Arjun Basu, who hosts the Full Bleed podcast, when we received the magazines, was like, have you smelled them? Have you smelled them yet? And Meara and I were doing this conference in Los Angeles last year when it launched, and people were walking by and sniffing them because they had just come off the machine. For me, that's a part of it. It is a part of it. It's a sensory experience.
Totally, yeah. I love the way that the stories in the magazine, like, you'll get one story ends on a page and another story starts on the page. Says that, and you've got that line at the beginning about this is a field broadly centered on the expansion of the mind. Meanwhile, the cartoonish version of psychedelic culture we're accustoms ourselves to is a cramped corridor. Elastic is interested in taking the walls down, or rather, Elastic is interested in demonstrating that the walls were never really there. And first of all, I was kind of weirded out by like these stories. Like, hang on, you're not meant to do that. You're meant to finish a story at the bottom of a page and then start the next on the next page. But I just felt like the whole thing kind of flowing to the magazine was just such a lovely effect.
Wait till you see the next one.
Oh.
You'll be even more freaked out.
So give us a preview then. What's happening with the next one?
I feel like, Meara, you should talk about how much weirder it is.
The next issue is crazy, and I love it so much. It's so the theme is interspecies, which again we're interpreting quite broadly. So there are stories about people kind of sustaining relationships with a fungus that used to be attached to their dead partner's body. There's pieces about unborn babies that keep being born and unborn. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. Like, I mean, it's one of those things where like you start to sort of summarize each piece and it just sounds absolutely nuts. But I think, again, what's amazing about this issue is it's really wide ranging. It's looking at ecology, it's looking at technology, it's looking at relationships among non-human entities, it's looking at humans and fairy tales. But I really feel like, again, all of the stories pack a kind of emotional punch that feels very special and feels like it captures something about the kind of interconnectedness and porousness of all life forms. So it's really exciting and feels bold and kind of very timely. and ambitious. I think because it's a challenging issue. I think some of the pieces are going to require readers to suspend even more disbelief and just go with the flow and accept utter strangeness and confusion. And I think that that's really exciting.
Well,
Yeah.
look, talking about challenging issues. So to start your first issue with the theme of dying, like that's pretty ballsy. Like, what was behind that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it partially was just kind of a wink to people who are interested in the psychedelic experience. Like, yeah, we know that dying is just the beginning. But I think that, like, I think it was important that the first theme speak to both those people and to the writers and artists, a lot of whom, I mean, especially the writers, have never had their work referred to as psychedelic before. So it's like, I felt that it was a theme that a lot of inevitably, I mean, there's this quote in the editor's note from the wonderful writer Garth Greenwell, who says something like, "All of art is just saying over and over again, 'I'm dying, love me.'" And there is a way, I mean, especially in the way that we've interpreted dying here, which is to mean all kinds of endings and beginnings and processes by which the self is transformed and transcended. It's like, I think that that immediately spoke to the writers who we were seeking to commission, because it's like, if you make visual art and there's even something psychedelic to it, you've probably heard the word in reference to your artwork before. But these writers who are playing with time and scrambling genre and perspective have not heard that word related to their work before. And so to be able to sort of ground the project and say, okay, this is the dying issue. I think also, as I mentioned before, like thinking about what kind of, like, when we were commissioning, we were like, we're looking for work that operates in a psychedelic register, which means whatever you want it to mean, in order to get at states and experiences that can be really difficult to describe straightforwardly or linearly. The first thing that came to everybody's mind was grief and loss. And so it just felt like sort of a natural starting point. As funny as that is,
Yeah, well,
and it's, the next issue, which is coming out in April, which is due to the printer very soon, is, similarly does that, where it gets at these states and experiences that can be impossible to explain straightforwardly, like the fact that we're all connected. Just being a living thing among other living things is like both the most ordinary and like the strangest thing in the world. Yeah.
and thinking about how that stuff gets like visually represented. So you said, you're using artists who their work probably hasn't conventionally been called psychedelic before, but also the type of, I guess, sort of like imagery that they're using manages to nod towards the idea of dying without any kind of like sort of cliche or old trope. So like just these repeated images of like teeth and like eggs and rotten fruit. Rotten fruit, I suppose, makes sense, but there's something there that's just like, oh, I totally see that this is about dying, but I would never normally think of like teeth as being a representative
Yes.
of that.
I mean, that's the work of our amazing creative directors, Chloe Sheffe and Natalie Shields, who introduced this whole other dimension. I mean, first of all, their work, which is to, like, psychedelic design from the first psychedelic era is so recognizable. It's like very influenced by Art Nouveau, and anyway, you can imagine like the flowing lines and the hand lettering and like the optical color vibrations. And so to say to two creative director designers, like, what could psychedelic design in 2025, 2026 look like, is obviously just like a massive ask and undertaking. And their system is really interesting. And one of the things they introduce is what we call house collage, which are just these random images that are totally haphazard and in some way, as you've noted, like tie the whole thing together.
That element kind of offers this way for us to kind of lightly thread together and bring into the reader's mind these ideas that sometimes in the pieces may be a little bit more latent. But as you say, like you look at a broken egg and you somehow it evokes what you want it to evoke. So
Totally.
that's, I mean, a hugely exciting part of this being a print magazine is being able to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, but then also, a massive part of you being a print magazine means that the whole time you were working on issue one, I mean, like, you must have seen hundreds and hundreds of PDFs as this thing came together, but then you don't really see it until the magazine comes out and you hold this thing in your hands. So, like, were there any things in there that kind of surprised you? I mean, like, just thinking, like, the format, for example, is like talking about something being just a little bit off from like the normal, like having that almost square format. There's just something there. You're like, oh, this is like a normal magazine, but a little bit not.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. I mean, it's crazy, like moving from digital publishing to print publishing and just thinking about all of those details has been amazing. And like, how can they serve the editorial vision? Like, I'm so interested in general in print as like not just vessel for the thing, but as a part of the editorial vision and experience. And I think that there's a way in which we could do that here. It's like if the idea is that everything be slightly like kind of ordinary but slightly off, like in the first issue, and this is less so in the second, but in the first issue every single page has a full color background, and what those are scans of textured paper. So you look at this thing and it looks like a piece of textured paper that is pink, but it's not that. It's something else. And so you touch it and you're expecting something, but that's not what it is. There are just so many details that you can play with. And definitely when we first received them, we tried to do an unboxing video at this conference in Los Angeles. And Meara can attest to the fact that I like opened the boxes for the first time, picked it up, and was just like so stunned and overwhelmed. I asked my partner to please turn off the camera immediately. Like I couldn't be like, wow. I was just like, oh my God. This is the whole vision together for the first time. Yeah.
It's
And
very
so
high
then,
stakes.
totally, exactly. Okay, so then given the high stakes, like high wire act of printing thousands of these things and then opening the box and seeing one for the first time, were there any things that you decided that you wanted to change for the second issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the changes have to do with the materials. It's like we have now, I mean, first of all, we're printing in Europe this time around. So that's like a whole other thing. We're printing with NPN, who prints like probably more than two, but off the top of my head, two of my favorite magazines, Emergence and MacGuffin. And it's just like we so love those publications and the way that they operate and the attention to detail. And so, yeah, this is like a very different process where we've now picked a paper that we would want to showcase, that has that sort of like tactile thing that we're looking for in a psychedelic art magazine. And so we're letting the paper breathe a little bit more. I think in general, like I was talking with Chloe, the creative director, yesterday, and we were talking about how the design in the second version feels like the magazine is growing up and it's just this kind of sophisticated like version. Anyway, it's like now suddenly you do something once and you just go for it because maybe it's just going to happen once. But then you realize like, uh-oh, we have to think about the longevity of this thing and what is a psychedelic design system? Like how does it evolve? So that's where we're at, and it's really interesting.
Also prioritizing, not just the kind of, not just demonstrating that the physical object reflects this rich and layered experience, but also that it's readable and that it really facilitates um, as many people as possible really enjoying all of this incredible writing that we've been editing for months and months. So I think weighing up and balancing some of those things is maybe a little bit more front and center this time around.
Yes, we're prioritizing legibility more, that's for sure.
There was nothing illegible in the first issue. Let's be clear.
Thank you. Yes,
look,
but like
I mean,
bigger typeface size and like a little bit more kind of some black and white. One thing that's really interesting is like Chloe has been experimenting with it's like obviously the first issue is so like maximalist in how it deals with color, and I found it really interesting to see that in the second issue sometimes where there is no color, it's the text that's playful. And I think that one of the reasons it's like how text is laid out on the page, and I think that one of the reasons that the second issue has gone in that direction is because people really experimented with form this time around, and did so in part, I think, because an interspecies issue is really about like like the natural world, the outside world, how we interact, and the world is sort of in collapse, which I'm sure everyone has noticed. And so it's like I think that the form, like the forms that people are playing with, yeah, that they're getting weird to mirror that kind of fracture that we're seeing on the outside.
well, I mean, I can't wait to see this thing that you've made. I loved the first one. The second one sounds brilliant. So thank you again for taking the time to tell me about it now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.